table, but it's nice to start on time. And could I welcome you all? This is really now we're beginning the formal part of council after swearing in. Welcome everybody this morning, and could I just remind, as it's really our first meeting, that this meeting is being live streamed. And if I explain to the public too that all councillors have these iPads, and we're all getting used to them. They've been updated for those of us that have had iPads in the past. So you will see councillors going on their iPads, and that's doing council business. So the agenda is fully on the iPad, as is all their schedule of meetings, and this is a working tool, and it is allowed at council meetings, a very important item for us to have, just so that the public don't think we're doing Sudoku. So that's about that. Also, we have a collective agreement that mobile phones should be turned off and put out of reach. If you do have calls, because many of you do get breakthrough calls, could you just signal that you're waiting for a call, and then we'll take a break halfway through the meeting so that you can clear your phones. All right? Thank you. And now I'm going to ask Councillor Tapsell to stand, and all councillors, and we'll begin with our council prayer.
Thank you, Your Worship. E te atua kaharawa, ko koe te tohu rangatira, te tohu mātauranga, manakitia mai mātou, au pononga I tēnei rā, e mahi nei I a mātou mahi, o te painga o ngā tangata o te kaunihera o Rotorua. Takua mai, kia tau te rangi Mārie, ki runga I a mātou I ngā wā katoa, koehu karaiti hoki tō mātou ariki, āmene.
Thank you. And for those watching, we rotate around the councillors for the opening of the prayer. And can I also welcome the public? It's lovely to see more of you here. Thank you. It's great that you're showing an interest in council business. I now call for any apologies, and I do have an apology that I move for Trevor Maxwell. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Rotorua Way. There are no further apologies. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Are there any declarations of interest? There appear to be none. Are there any urgent items not on the agenda? Councillor Bentley and then Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just seeking reassurance that at a previous council meeting I raised an issue with regard to inner city safety, and we're assured that we would have an update prior to Christmas. Just hoping that that's still on the agendas.
Want to speak to that? You will get an update prior to Christmas. It is very important. So I can assure you, from the Chief Executive, it'll probably be on the 12th. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the 30th October meeting of Council, we had the annual report and audit summary of the Rotorua Lakes Council for the year ended 30th June. I abstained from voting at the time because I hadn't had the capacity to do a systematic appraisal. I've now finished that, and I seek, as a matter of urgency, to be able to table paper, and it's there are basically 7 points of concern that I've got. And they're of such a nature, I think it might be best if they're referred to you and the Chief Executive deal with some urgency, because as I understand it, the report is going to be signed off. There's a letter of representation, a statement of compliance. I would urge these matters be considered prior to those signatures being made, or is it already dispatched?
Yes, absolutely. That is the form after, so it was tabled and voted on. Correct. So you're rather late, but you'll know next time. And the letters have gone, which is we have to get that report to audit within a time frame. So you're out of that time frame, and I think the opportunity is well and truly past.
then would you like me to submit the document to you and the Chief Executive so you can take account of it?
Yep, that's helpful.
Splendid.
Thank you. Are there any other urgent items? There appear to be none. We now move into the confirmation of council minutes. Now, there were two council meetings. The inaugural council meeting on the 24th of October. I'll move those first. Do I have a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the inaugural meeting on the 24th of October be confirmed as a true and correct record? Moved Councillor Wang, seconded Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. And the subsequent minutes of the council meeting of the 30th of October, page 12, when you're scrolling through. Do I have a mover that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 30th of October be confirmed as a true and accurate record? Thank you. Councillor Tapsell, seconded. Councillor Rotorua Way. Are there any corrections? All those in favour, please.
Sorry,
yes.
Madam Mayor. Just a query, just in terms of which I asked when Stavros was presenting, is that the recommendation was 2 years, 8 months, and it's to do with the timing, whereas the minutes record 3 years. So which is the correct period for the minutes?
2 years, 8 months. Yeah, 2 years, 8 months. So
I think the minutes need to be
get that
amended
corrected.
then.
Thank you for scrutiny is a good thing. We move now to the staff reports, the council endorsements of the 2019-2022 priorities. Just a mover and a seconder to receive the report. Moved Councillor Rotorua Way, seconded Councillor Yates. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. And before Una comes to the table, I'd just like to congratulate staff for putting together the most comprehensive orientation program that we as council have ever had, and the appreciation of councillors to get in that bus and get out around our district to be seen and to also meet people from the community very involved in projects and staff of the CCOs. Wherever we went, we had staff, the right staff there, if you can pass that on, Chief Executive, and it was really wonderful encounters for us to be able to ask the right questions. So we had actually had four parts to this: getting to know the organisation, which is about us all being on the same page, and I think what we all realised was how complex this organisation is, thank you, and it's one large organisation. And then setting our priorities that Una will cover off that last workshop, and then establishing the way that we're going to work together, that was about our expected behaviours as elected members, and understanding our decision-making framework, so very important. And then the last one, and then I'll certainly get to Councillor Rotorua Way, was the financial strategy, and that was another workshop. I think this is the most comprehensive approach of an orientation that I've ever seen, and I congratulate all of you for putting that together, and the forbearance of councillors to understand that there is a process to go through. Councillor Rotorua.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I realise that the orientation was primarily for our new elected members, but can I say, as a returning councillor, I actually found it, I did find it very, I wasn't able to get to all of them, but I did find it really interesting again, just to realise that, you know, while we've been here, some of us a number of years, just to realise the benefits for us, because sometimes we think, oh, well, we know everything. We think we do, you know, because we've been here some time, some years, but actually it was a wonderful refresher, I think, personally, I felt, as a returning councillor to be there for that orientation. It was so comprehensive, so I do thank the staff as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Una, over to you.
Tēnā koutou katoa, everyone, and welcome. So today I'm just going to take us briefly through an overview of the journey that you have been under during the induction program, and that going through a journey leads us to a position where we will highlight and go through the priorities that you have set in the workshops over the last week or so. So just in summary, so as the Mayor has already said, we had an induction process which was consisted of 4 parts. And so our program around getting to know the organisation was done by actually getting outside of this council building and actually going out to sites and locations and seeing projects under development and getting a real feel for why these projects were being done and the partners that were involved in enabling these projects to proceed. So the second part of the induction program has been based around setting of priorities, and we'll get onto that in a little bit more detail shortly. We have also then spent time where we've looked at, once those priorities have been set, how are you then going to work to enable those priorities being set? And that's around what is the decision-making framework going to look like, and what are the values and behaviours that this council will work with in order to deliver those priorities. And items on the agenda later on today cover off the decision-making framework, and then the values and behaviours will come back to this council next week on the 12th of December. And finally, we did some work just yesterday around the financial strategy. So this was looking at how the financial strategy links to the current LTP, and then going forward, what tools and mechanisms may this council look to use in order to be able to enable those priorities, and looking forward to the development of the next LTP. So in setting the priorities, we have gone back and reviewed and restated the fact that everything that we are doing, this current council is doing, goes back to 2013 when Vision 2030 was first established. And this direction still holds for everything that we're doing today. So 2013 has been described as the first chapter, and at that time the vision was set and some high-level goals were set, and those are up there on the screen today. In 2016, that vision was further developed and enhanced, and we looked at ways of linking projects with the strengths of Rotorua, and that's where strengths of active environment, easy lifestyle, strong culture and diverse opportunities were developed. And this enabled some transformational projects to get underway, and they flowed into the 2018 to 2028 LTP. And you can see up there on the screen, we've got a number of ticks against the majority of those projects up there, which is to show that these projects are well underway and progressing. So where are we today? So 2019, Chapter 3, is around setting the priorities, and there was a goal to develop a set of priorities that would progress the goals within Vision 2030 and provide direction for the future development and consideration of the vision beyond 2030, and maybe looking at a horizon out to 2050. So how was this done? What we've got here is a few snaps from the first bus tour. So the first bus tour was centred around those key projects and going out to project sites. The museum was visited, so was Shimpak, down to the lakefront and Waka Forest and Forest Hub too. And we met with many of the partners involved in these projects to understand the genesis of those projects, how they're progressing, and looked at timeframes and that type of stuff. We also spent some time out at different reserves where we had a look at the infrastructure in those sites and the need to continually look at ongoing investment in those areas. The second bus tour was focused around roading and transport issues and open space. So here we spent a considerable amount of time talking about those challenges out on the Eastern Corridor and ongoing work with NZTA around those roading connectors and corridors. We also spent some time finding out about the Skyway networks and how all of that is coming together within the district. And again, spent time down at various reserves and stuff to see where assets are being replaced or where assets still are needing to be replaced, and continual investment into those spaces. Now, our third bus tour, again, carried on the theme of open spaces and infrastructure, and we went on a tour of the wastewater treatment plant. So we're able to appreciate firsthand the operations down there and the impacts of growth on a very important piece of infrastructure. And again, themes around place shaping and making were discussed, ongoing investment that's required, our ageing infrastructure, and we also had an opportunity to start some conversations around barriers to growth. And what we haven't got up here is actually a photo around seeing some of the impacts of the climate change along Paradise Valley in recent floods. And the last bus tour was a bit of a walking bus tour, and this was around the CBD, where we met with police and got an appreciation for the work that is being jointly done between council and the police around safety in the city. And we also discussed parking, and then wandered through to Te Akamuri, where we had a fantastic tour of the DHB and got that real understanding of that link and partnership with the DHB and council to create the facility that's there. And remember, that was a dual partnership where we had a library that required some investment in terms of asset replacement and that. But look at the product that we've got at the end of it, that partnership and a complete new use to benefit the community and young children. And I think one of the really important things that came out of that is that this is a facility where families feel really comfortable to come, and that was evident in the terminology. So children in the past and families have found it really difficult to get up to Hospital Hill, and now people are actually attending those appointments. So that's really great to see. Okay, all right. And so again, just covering off some of the themes that came through there, and just want to highlight that we also, this tour here also reflected on those challenges and that were evident in the pre-election report. And we had one of our local school principals also attend and talk about his experiences with the Child Equity Program. So, setting of the council priorities, and I'm going to hand this over to JP now, and he's going to take us through that workshop that you were all involved in setting the priorities.
Good morning, councillors. Just to refresh your memories, it was just a case of, remember we had the discussion about, we'd put forward to each of the tables for discussion a straw person of some of the work that was currently underway and some broad headings of potential priority areas as a conversation starter. As you work through that, it became clear that really there was one key new priority area of focus for council. And a recognition that outside of that priority...
Madam Chair, could I ask if JP could move the microphone? Thank you. Sorry, it must be just me.
Yeah. Outside of that new priority, there was still that concern about ensuring that we had the continuity of the projects and initiatives we'd already identified as part of that vision to action that had been included within the long-term plan. So we really had sort of two groupings of one new priority area, and really we, at the time, with some working, sort of took it away from building livable communities, which tended to emphasise the shaping by us or the focus on housing to actually creating and working with communities to create livable communities. So much wider than just a housing focus. And on the other side, as we said, those finishing projects that we needed to pick up, which form the key elements of that vision to action and part of our current LTP. So while we've got ticks on those previous slides, a lot of those projects are ongoing and will still take several more years to complete. So when we talked about this creating livable communities, there was a lot of discussion at the time about what that meant, and for communities that meant connectivity and connection, both within a community to other people, but also in our view of the sustainable transport options and good urban design. Access to service, again, one of our issues that is quite prevalent is that concern around the accessibility of core wraparound services or delivery of core services, particularly into some of our existing communities. So a real equity issue. Health and ensuring our communities are healthy. So not only from parks and recreation, open space, access, but also from the homes that people live within. So insulation and safe homes as well. So again, safety leads to a discussion not only just about inside the home, but actually out into our wider suburban communities and then into our city as well. And then, of course, homes that match need. So a real looking forward perspective of changing demographics and changing typology of homes that are needed for our community. You know, more of an emphasis on the need for social housing, but also homes that match needs for ageing populations of smaller size and smaller section sizes. So, that's a bit hard to read. And yeah, so inputs, drivers, and influences is that next heading, and obviously the facilitation there is an important partnership between iwi, who have a particular interest in the housing solutions for our community and our wider community, and council, bringing together the other key partners, whether they're developers or government agencies, to ensure that where there has been things like market failure and barriers, these can be addressed, and we can get a range of solutions and developments for our communities across the full housing spectrum, but also provide that opportunity to develop and regenerate some of our communities. So again, that one says council levers. Sorry, I must have a green. So again, we talked again when we did the whiteboard session, councillors, about what's driving us. What are our frameworks for us to work within? And obviously, we've done a significant amount of work with our spatial plan, 30-year infrastructure plan, long-term plan, obviously. But also the desire there to create local plans, whether that represents a small lakes community or within another area like Rotorua, Mamaku, or even to a suburban area like Western Heights. And then, of course, the opportunity then to work with the community on structure plans and, where necessary, the last one, DP, the changes to the district plans around rules, density, and again, addressing some of those levers and opportunities. Goals. So we just talked about sort of the time frame. So clearly one of the key focuses was to make sure that when we've got a focus within the 3-year term for council, we're also laying the paving stones for a much longer intervention in sustainable communities. So really that view of we need to address some immediate housing concerns now, examine some of those key barriers that are preventing things like greenfields development, but actually really start thinking into the longer term of how we're building towards a much more sustainable future that reflects our community, but also deals with some of the issues and inequities that exist. So that very much that view around a community development approach and removing and putting in place those building blocks for a longer term sustainable community development. Again, the work streams that we're sort of seeing coming into that. So just breaking down some of these ones, and we talked about them and said that these are some of the ones that have been discussed already. So, and they relate in part to some of the actions identified in the spatial plan, but also the key partners' interest for us to start working more joined up on, in particular inner city housing, Papakainga, the Pukehangi plan change and development on the western side, eastern side, particularly Wharanui, and obviously the community development type approach that needs to be undertaken with the Nongataha community. The opportunities then to look at some of those key levers. We've talked about some of those intervention opportunities for councils around targeted rates, development contributions, special purpose vehicles and partnerships with other entities and private developers, and again highlighted that opportunity around a development company for council to ensure that we have an arm's length entity to support those kind of partnerships. And then finally, some of those interventions we talked about, and we spent some time talking about some of those barriers, particularly in infrastructure planning, which are actually creating some of our market failure at the moment that we need to look at some solutions on. Strong focus on building on the partnerships that we already have within the community, and it was mentioned about the opportunities around geothermal, but also innovation with Scion, and certainly that view around wood first has been quite important. Very strong focus on working with developers to identify those barriers and coming up with creative solutions to make sure we can keep developments moving, and then specific investment partnership opportunities, really with the opportunities now put in place with the formation of Kaingaora and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development seeking to partner with us. And then of course the much wider part is a community is made up of many different elements, and some of those little things that are quite important in even how we treat dogs in our different bylaws in different parts of the city. So some of those more human level imperatives as well. So and for us really the result there is that we have a much more sustainable, equitable, livable community, and again there's an opportunity for us really to drag in a lot of those important concepts around the sustainability of our communities, and in a view of how we support our lakes, our water quality and our environment, and how we develop for the future. So that's really what we'd captured from the whiteboard session we had with you councillors as the key priority for this term. And as we've talked about before, and as part of the roadmap that we've talked with you about, we'll be looking to put to you in February a process and a plan of how we're going to work with the various partners involved in this space to start rolling out a strategy and plan development, and immediately start delivering on some opportunities and some initiatives. So that's really the key focus there. So if I go back across now, and just before we suppose take any questions, remember we talked about some of the things that were underway and needed finishing. So we've kind of grouped these, and you'll see as he clicks through, they are grouped together in some general areas of focus. So within the arts and cultural area, obviously there's the project around Sir Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre, and obviously the restoration of the museum and Rotorua. So some important cultural elements for us, and an important opportunity for us to relook at our creative strategy and how those work successfully with the reopening and refocusing of those facilities. Within the sort of economic development sphere, the ongoing work around the lakefront revitalisation and development, and to support the investment that should go in and around that project. Similarly with the forest development project, certainly a strong recreation focus, but a real economic development opportunity around that to enhance the mountain biking and recreational opportunities of the forest and its owners. Roading and transport, a key enabler or disabler of economic growth and development for our city, so an important focus for us, and also the vitality of the inner city. So we've got a link here across many of these priorities about inner city living, but also the vibrancy, viability, and the focus of retail and business within the inner city as well. Within the sort of the sport and rec area, we've talked and showed you projects underway around Quirau Park and the skate park, obviously one that's still got some work to go, and aquatic centre funding and the focus on the renewal of that facility is critical projects for us. And part of the bus trip was also to highlight to you some of those assessments of our current recreation facilities and sports grounds, and the opportunities that are there to focus, and redevelop those facilities to ensure they're fit for purpose, not only for our current population, but for the future population as well. As far as the sort of sustainable environment space and really an importance there around our future growth and development, wastewater treatment plants that have remained planned or in planning, and obviously water supplies as well, critical for our sustainable development and our environment. And the other piece here, which was part of our people portfolio, the UN Compact Cities focus, and a key action out of that was to start looking at our climate action plan and our climate response, so a key plank within that portfolio area previously, and obviously some work, and we've talked about that yesterday. Work started last year on benchmarking and starting to identify the adaptations and interventions that we may need to undertake and build in as a community as far as education and action is concerned, but also into our long-term planning as well. So, councillors, that's pretty much a capture of what we undertook in that focus. So a key priority, or the key priority for this coming year, is about this portfolio or focused area and creating livable communities, so quite a wide breadth across all those housing and development needs, but also keeping the focus on the work we're currently undertaking.
And thank you for being able to condense quite a comprehensive orientation into a page, because this then becomes the document that we take out to our community with workshops and when we start to look at the underlying work. So today is about agreeing that you've got the priorities that we all suggested, right? And thank you for changing the name. So everything that I see there has been captured, but perhaps we'll open it up now if anyone wants to speak to this. Yes, Councillor Donald, so any councillor may speak to this. Yes.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Una and JP, for the presentation. From where I sat and where I participated, I think it's a great representation of the view of the workshop as a whole, and I'm fully supportive of the priorities as tabled there. I just had one little question on the right. I'm familiar with the name Te Whare Taonga or Te Arawa, but I'd never seen it presented that way before. So, but apart from that, 100% in support. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor McPherson?
Thank you both very much. I really enjoyed the induction, the range of visits and the exposure to the ideas that lie behind the assumptive basis being used by our planners. First is just a technical matter. White on light green is, for me, virtually unreadable. So if we can, I don't know, cope with my little idiosyncrasy, that'd be helpful. With regard to display, this is a very useful, as you point out, summary of the priorities that we've set ourselves. Is it at all possible this can be added to the report itself or put out through the news system so we get this information out to people quickly? Because a lot of people do need reassurance at this stage about how quickly we're moving on some of our big problems. The next suggestion is on climate change. Do we have any sort of a concept of timeline on that? That is emerging as quite an urgent issue for a lot of people.
A couple of answers off that. Definitely, I've got the same problem with you as the Green, so I won't be encouraging us to do that again. The other bit too is, yes, we can certainly attach this presentation into the minutes and make it available for the community as quickly as possible. Obviously, some councillors have just taken some photographs of it, but we'll circulate it out. So even if it's just a standalone slide or a PDF, we make that available as quickly as possible. The climate action response, look, it was part of our UN Compact City Plan. And there had been a significant amount of work undertaken last year, so a lot of stakeholder meetings and the baseline analysis of emissions levels at a council and a community level had been identified. And with discussions with those stakeholders, some tentative suggestions for interventions and actions had also been identified. Obviously, as we were nearing the end of the triennial term, we put those on hold, and as I said at the workshop, we reported that it was a major issue within the Chief Executive's pre-election report that needed to be addressed with urgency. So now that we're through this phase, and the intention was to bring back to you, as was stated, reports in February detailing how we're responding and what's the process we intend to use to carry forward existing works, but also how we plan to move forward with that new priority area as well. So by February, we'll have mapped out the process for us to pick up where we had stopped, which was having gone a long way down the process, and restart that with the intention, as we've laid out in the roadmap that we've shown you, of really having some sort of real plans in place in that June through to August period, so that you can make some decisions within the current or next annual plan, and certainly leading into the next long-term plan. So certainly that focus within the next 6 months.
JP, thank you for mentioning the roadmap. I think it would have been really good to have that in the report too, so that people know where the next stage of this is evident. But if that can come out in the minutes, that would be great. Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of questions, JP. In that short-term priority, you've got enable houses to be built. And so it's just really around that wording of enable. So are we talking, we're simply enabling others to do it, or are we actually also going to be looking at whether or not the council builds? And then following on from that, and perhaps I'll wait till you answer that question, but
I think you've touched on one of the issues. I think we have to start thinking about whether there's opportunities for us to be directly involved. We hadn't put it there at this stage in any more detail than that, because I think there's some work for us still to do with some of those key agencies that we would probably be looking to work with in that kind of space. So I hadn't gone quite so far as to write up some that kind of direct intervention, but we're certainly there in enabling houses to be built, is really looking at the land opportunities for some of those key agencies who are very keen to see at least some initial housing built straight away. So Kāinga Ora, and with the support of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, but also, and Alapetra and I have been talking about it, making sure we're also looking at those opportunities for iwi trusts who have a view on what those specific barriers to Papakainga development are now, which could be supported so we can see those delivered, and equally enabling some of those other things to be good. So we need to be working with some of our developers about making sure that the construction industry is ready. So one issue is obviously greenfield supply, but we also need the builders and the building companies there to support it as well. So there's a lot of other parts, as well as the opportunity for council to be a builder, but I think we would need to come back with a lot more detail for you in that February timeframe for work streams.
And the second part of that was about reallocation of housing resources, and we had touched on that very briefly around the Airbnb, where we've got our tourists living in our houses and our got them in the wrong places. So is that something that's part of the short-term enabling of?
I think one of these things we've got to be careful on is we can't obviously impose how people use their homes, but obviously the question was raised yesterday during the financial strategy conversation about if it's treated as short-term accommodation, do we need to look in more detail at the current rating rules we have? And there's a couple of other opportunities we're exploring through Tourism New Zealand and directly to groups like Airbnb about how they can better manage themselves or that provision. So there's still some opportunities in that space, but I think the key one there is it's a link to a rating discussion for us in the short term as well. Yeah.
Sorry, the last part of the question was just around current housing stock and the ability of council to assist the upgrade or the insulation, so that we are, in terms of that well-being, ensuring that people are actually living in healthy homes, and I don't see that as part of that in either the short or the medium long term, if that's something that council is going to be involved in.
I think it's you're right, and that is something that we had in there in that focus area of ensuring homes are healthy. So we have the Sustainable Solutions team at the moment looking at how you support the home insulations, and that also supports the regional council's program on the changeover from fires to heat pumps, but that also needs to be linked to those other initiatives. So in the past there has been a significant amount of investment through ICA and philanthropic trusts for home insulation, and there's still a lot of work to be done in that space because there are still significant deficiencies across our community. So, Councillor, you're absolutely right. We haven't captured everything. We've just tried to get it onto one slide at the moment, but that fuller, complete detail of the full breadth of what we intend to be covered, and they will be very much different work streams under this umbrella, will be coming to you in that more detailed process that we outline in the February report.
Add there, on the left hand, well, depends where you're sitting, but on the Create Livable Communities, we actually haven't said on there, but the whole of that box is about community wellbeing.
Yeah.
And that's a focus that as a council, since last July, we now have to be able to say, what are we doing about community wellbeing? So why don't we put that under there? Because as you've got climate on the other side, I think it is our major goal. Just a suggestion.
No, that's good.
Councillor Kumar, then Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, JP. Thank you, Una. Yeah, it was quite a heavy induction, and almost relieved that it's over and we can, when they say, when things are done and said, the real work starts. And so it's good that Christmas break is coming over, so we come back refreshed in February and ready to go. But I'm just looking there at a couple of things. One thing that does perturb me is the inner city vibrancy. I'm wondering whether, because the old term was revitalization, and what are we talking about? Are we talking about rebooting the city? Because my heart really lies in seeing Rotorua City businesses getting a good focus, that businesses can bounce back in the face of, because we can't keep telling the businesses that, hey, look, gear up, it's the internet world and this is how you got to, there are people that still love to come to the city. Forget the parking for a second. Let's not go there. We'll visit that next year. But at the moment, let's just talk about what are we talking about? Are we going to give that city, are we going to pedestrianize it or whatever? I'm thinking that our city really needs a good, and yesterday in one of the presentation, I think Thomas did say that when he came in 2012 and he saw the city and he thought, whoa, so many empty shops and all. We've gone through that. We've had some reports as well. How are we looking to, and my main concern is, are we looking to really give it a good hit so that businesses can sort of walk along proudly and say, hey, look, the malls are not really killing us, but councils really come behind us? And the other thing is
that's your question.
Yeah,
how
that's my
question.
How are we going to focus?
And let's answer that first, and then your next bit.
I don't have a specific answer, and I think the key here is that we didn't intend to have an answer at this point. Okay. That the intention was not to talk about solutions, but to say what are the priority areas we want to focus on, and take the time to map out the process we would be using to engaging in the development of some of those solutions. So I think the key element you're raising is it's time now to talk back into the CBD with the property owners, with the retailers and the businesses that operate in that space, and also understanding their aspirations about what they would see as being important. We've had groups, and probably the most recent one is Evolve, suggesting some changes that they believe would strengthen Tūtanakai Street and extend Eat Street. But again, it's people at this point talking about potential solutions. So we need to get everyone's views and just work through what are those options or those interventions we should be looking at. So when we come back to you in February, the intention is just to lay out a process of how we're going to work through to identify what those could or should be for then implementation after that.
So this is just laying out the priorities, and it's in there.
Okay, and just and add on to that is just, I hope we have a look at the conversions as well for where the offices lie. You know, at the moment we've got offices, and if we had some way made it much easier and better for people to sort of live with it, you know, whatever the levers that sort of stop that or stunt that growth, it might be quite an exciting thing. And super. And the other thing I'm quite excited about is the enabling house program. You know, I hope as a council we can work hard to be providers, you know, not builders and stuff. You know, there are lots of builders out there. I've read an economic report plan that the $40 billion was spent in Christchurch over the last 7-8 years because of the earthquake. They've spent $40 billion, but now they've got to get the people to come there, live there, and what's that? So what we need to be careful of is to provide the space for the builders, the developers to come over. We can do as much announcements as we can, but we don't want to really get into being builders and stuff as well, you know. Imagine councils start importing houses from China and all that kind of stuff, because we really don't know what the cost of it is and what we're going to be holding. So I just hope that we can provide a good space for them along good council support.
Yeah. So we're not into the specifics, but we understand. The workshop, for those listening, covered these issues very, very comprehensively. So the questions that you asked were put at the workshops. I've just got other councillors, and I'll get you all there. First, it's Councillor Bentley Donaldson, and then Councillor Rotorua Way.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just thank you for your presentation from the peer review. With regard to the 5 goals you've got on the 18 to 28 one on the right-hand side there, I would like to suggest that we include utilising our geothermal resource should be included in that as well for the future.
So a point there, JP, do you want to speak to that about where it fits? Because you did mention that with the livable communities.
Yes, Your Worship. But look, there's a couple of places where geothermal plugs directly into sort of the work program. So if under the current initiatives that we actually have under our Compact City work, and potentially within that climate change work, we've been looking at obviously the geothermal connection to this building and potentially then onto Sir Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre as well. So we have looked at our own operations, and we will continue to look at our own operations in regard to geothermal. The reference you've made to geothermal, we've tried to pick up again in those potential interventions, so those innovations and the partnerships. So we talked about Scion and geothermal there, which was where we did capture it at the time. So yeah, the importance of it being linked to potential sustainable residential development. So hopefully that reassures the councillor it's covered in both sides, council's climate action response, but equally within the housing discussion.
I wonder if it needs to be mentioned. I think I hear that from Councillor Bentley, you know, because there is great interest in this. So, yeah, it's there. Innovation, yeah, science, geothermal. So as long as it's there, great. Now we've got Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Worship. It was just a quick response to Councillor Kumar's question about the inner city, just so that we're all on the same page, and I'm not sure if he was able to be present when we had the walk through Te Manawa, but there we discussed not only inner city safety. We had a developer come out of his building covered in paint and plaster and talk about conversions of existing priorities, and also Stavros spoke about presenting 3 options for inner city transport connectivity right across the inner city that will be presented to council to take one of them out for public consultation next year. So behind this one-pager, there's a lot of work going on and a lot of detail to go in, and we'll get into that as JP says next year. Thank you, Worship.
Councillor Rotorua and Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation this morning. Yes, Madam Chair, I was just looking up there at our priorities and, you know, the priority create livable communities. And these are not going to be fixed overnight. You know, these you know, if you're talking about healthy, making sure that our community is healthy, and that's not only the environment, but it's also our families. I mean, if you're talking about safety, whether it's personal or safety in our cities, in our communities, and housing, these are significant issues, often underpinned by social issues, and the well-beings that we're trying to look at and incorporate as well. I mean, the government's concerned enough about them, and we're trying to do our bit as well. But I just want to say, thank goodness we've narrowed it down to some priorities. But if we're looking for some runs on the board, you know, within the next 6 months, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I mean, the underpinning of these issues has been around for such a long time, and that's what we're trying to overcome. We're trying to haul somebody's, I won't say what I was going to say, but we're trying to haul everybody to a space or to a position where they're living to their potential. But these issues are significant, and they're underpinned by so often, I mean, we're a diverse community, but so often we're battling deprivation, you know, all of the, you know, low income, existing poor housing, absolutely chronic health situation. That's what we're battling with. And so I'm just saying it's great to have them up there. It's great to have them as our priority. And I know we'll be working hard, but, you know, we have to understand that this is not going to happen overnight. So I just wanted to make sure that we're very aware of that.
So
all the goodwill in the world.
Yeah, the question is, I know we're setting them for the next 3 years, but we still only use the 2050, and that is a more realistic target. If we then said in our chapter, this is chapter 3 of, you know, the build-up, but we want it to stretch to 2050, then we're able to measure ourselves on those equity issues and poverty and health.
I just also add, Your Worship, that when we talk about safety, and we have to understand that it's the difference it makes to our families. We might set our priorities and say it's important, and it is important, but the work that we do has to make a difference for the families, and it's only then that we'll know that we've been successful as we move through. So in some way, at some stage, we've got to capture the difference that our work is making, particularly in the area of safety and health. So again, it's not easy. Thank you.
So like the measures, you've raised a very good point. In February, will we start to see how we are measuring success, or does that come later?
Your Worship, I think that's part of that development process we've got to take forward over the next 6 months. I think the here is, as we go through a process of engaging with the community, talking about and fleshing out those priorities in detail and what those interventions might be as part of different strategies and plans, I think that's the time to make sure that the measures that will help us track progress are identified as part of that.
Right. And Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, JP and Una, for all the work that you've done behind the scenes to get this to us in such a short time frame. Firstly, I actually want to acknowledge the role that iwi have played in all of this, in the establishment of the city, because within the induction process, all of those sites that we visited were actually either gifted or currently managed by iwi. So I want to, you know, I know it's an unsaid thing, but we must remember and acknowledge that iwi are a significant landowner, ratepayer and investor, so I'm really glad to see them up there as a key partner. The housing and creating livable communities, this is something that, you know, we really can't wait on. So I hope that the short term is within the next 2 to 6 months, because we do have 2,700 people in Rotorua living in taxpayer-assisted emergency housing, and that's something that we need to address now, and we know as our population continues to grow, it will only get worse. So MSD need 500 emergency housing homes here in Rotorua right now. So I'm really pleased that we're taking this leadership role from Council, now that we have the mandate under the Wellbeings, to actually do something about this for our community, because it's something that they've seen coming, they're suffering from now, and will continue to suffer from in the future. The question I did have was, where does infrastructure fit into this? I see 30-year IP, maybe that's infrastructure plan. It is, okay, I'm getting a nod. Because as a core service of council, the infrastructure is key, and I'm thinking mostly around stormwater, because we know that stormwater is a big barrier for development, and also a big risk in terms of the changing climate and increased flooding risk for our communities. So perhaps it probably is a priority in all those, but I'm just looking at it thinking it's not clear that infrastructure and stormwater priorities now need to be upgraded to, I'm not sure if it'll be high risk, but just do it as soon as possible. And I just also want to acknowledge that we actually finally have climate change up there, and I say that because we've known that environment is an issue. We are mandated under the Resource Management Act to protect the future, to protect the environment for future generations. It is a core role of what we do, and there has been a lot of work behind the scenes, and I encourage people that UN Compact Cities, if you just go onto our website, you will see a very comprehensive report of everything that Council has been doing, because it's much broader than just climate change, sea level rise and flooding. It's actually making sure that our communities are livable and will continue to be livable in the future. So I want to acknowledge the work that's been done, but also just suggest that infrastructure and stormwater particularly probably should be acknowledged or notified, and be clear on how we're actually going to ensure that we're protecting that, but also delivering on that as soon as possible.
Right, well, great summary really from you all, and can I thank you all for your participation, because that was the start, that we as a team could come up with a product 8 weeks after the election, and well done, because you've got that beautifully captured. Busyness on the completion vision to action that completes chapter 2 leading into chapter 3 and can't be lost, and then having set this priority of creating livable communities. I'm exceptionally proud of you all, because you worked together with some good discussion in the workshops, and seeing things actually helped us shape our place that we want to see in the future. I'd somehow like the stretch out to 2050. I'm very aware Te Arawa's looking at a Te Arawa plan that's sort of, they're dying for these priorities, and Te Tato was part of our workshops too. So working in partnership, it's nice to have that reflected. But I'm really proud of this, because we got given the challenge of well-beings, and we're now putting people at the heart of the next 3 years and beyond, actually. It is and beyond. And we really realised that when we heard about the issues of equity, poverty, health deprivation, as Councillor Rotorua Tate has mentioned, and that all leads to the safety issues that we all feel really strongly. So the bit that I want to see at the end is that we do include our community, and I know you will. We'll get the roadmap in February where we know how we're going to take this out into our community, get their response on this. The strengthening of the partnership, and you mention it there, of other partners that will now come in this chapter, and also then restoring pride. And that's when I think we've achieved success. So thank you, councillors, and you have another...
No, Madam Chair, I was just going to move point 2.
Great.
Thank you. I'll move point 2, thank you, Madam Chair.
You move point 2, and that is, you second, Councillor Donaldson, so that is that we endorse the council priorities as stipulated in the one-pager. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Well done. Right, we now move on to recommendation 2, which is process about the establishment of the committee structure and appointment of chairs, deputy chairs and members. It's page 21 on your Stella. Do I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councillor Rotorua Tate, seconded. Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Una, would you like to speak to this?
So this paper here, I think, leads on very nicely from what we've just discussed in terms of the setting of the priorities and the link through to the vision. In order to make progress, there needs to be a decision-making framework put in place where your work can be, and the work of the community and the district and this organisation, can be looked at and reflected upon. So the way of doing that is the creation of the committee structure. And under the mayoral powers, the mayor has the ability to set that committee structure and make the appointments of the chair and deputy chair's roles in that. This process has been followed for this term, and in the paper it outlines what that committee structure is and the chairpersons and deputy chairpersons. But I just want to take the time to sort of just give a quick overview of what those committees do. So the full council, which this is today, is the final decision-making committee for all recommendations that come to you from other committees and from the substantive committees of council. Those two substantive committees are the Operations and Monitoring Committee and the SPNF Committee. The Operations and Monitoring Committee is set up to look at progress and to monitor that progress. So in simple terms, it's kind of looking at everything that's been done and reflecting on it, going on what has been achieved. That committee also monitors the financial position of this council, and on a monthly will reflect upon the financials and the progress of that against the annual plan or the LTP. The Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee is the committee that is set up that, in simple terms, is the Looking Forward Committee. So that's the committee that develops and works through long-term plans, LTPs, setting direction, creating policy. Then, as we discussed end of last week, there are a number of other committees that form part of the overall committee structure, and we went through those last week. So that's the Audit and Risk Committee. And I just want to make a note there that since we discussed that last week, there's been a couple of additions to the membership of that one. The chair of in terms of the Audit and Risk Committee, there are external appointments made for the position of chairperson and deputy chairperson. The membership for that committee, as up there, is outlined as the mayor, the deputy mayor, Chair of Strategy, Policy and Finance, and the Chair of Operations and Monitoring Committee. However, we want to put in an addition there that in the case of an absence due to leave, we want to create an alternate position so that the Deputy Chair of the Strategy, Policy and Finance and the Operations and Monitoring can fulfil the role in the Audit and Risk Committee when the chairs are away from council on absence of leave. There's also been discussions with our partners, Te Tātou, to have a nominated position from that board onto the Audit and Risk Committee as well. And so we're just putting those up there now for later on when we get into discussion on that. I think the rest of it is within the paper itself, and I'm happy to take any questions on the committee structure and the membership.
So it is now open for questions. And if there are no, yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Una. I just had a question around operations and monitoring, and it falls out of some of the discussion in the previous item on setting priorities. So it might have been Councillor Tapsell that raised the performance measures. So we've got a set of performance measures, with traffic lights against them. Will we be revisiting those? Because I know in the previous term some of those were considered outdated or ineffective as measures of our actual progress and achievements.
there's kind of two levels to performance measures. The first one is the performance measures at the activity or effectively the service delivery area, and those are set within the annual plan. And those get reported back to Council through the Operations and Monitoring Committee on a quarterly basis. In addition to that, as part of the LTP, Council is required to measure their community outcomes. And in our last LTP, it was agreed that those community outcomes equalled the 7 goals of the Vision 2030. Initially, when those goals in Vision 2030 were established, there was a set of measures and targets for those. And what we have found that over time is that those measures weren't really capturing whether there was progress in a positive position against those goals. So we have for some time been looking at alternative ways of measuring those outcomes, and that is work that needs to be ongoing and will go into the next LTP for progress against those goals and Vision 2030.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Can I add to the theme of that question? That is, from my review of the annual report, one of the unusual features for me is that the notes that relate to all the different programs of Council do not contain budgets. So it would be helpful to display it, to be able to demonstrate successful completion and so on within programs by delivering against budget. So I'd like to put that idea on the table for consideration of including it as part of the performance measures of programs and projects. Thank you.
No? Councillor Okawata? Yes.
Oh, here I am. Can we just have the audit and risk one up, please? I couldn't see it. Yes, and it's the inclusion of the Te Tato or Te Aroa member. I have to say that I wouldn't like to see anyone less than the chair, if at all. If at all. You know, the Audit and Risk Committee is a significant committee of this organisation, of the Council. I've been a member for 6 years. I think I've been a member for 6 years. Mm-hmm. And you've got to know the workings of this organisation. Mm-hmm. Because I don't want to sit there and have somebody constantly asking and all that sort of thing. I'm not interested in that. So I don't mean to be rude, Madam Chair, but I'm just saying, if we're going to have the Deputy Mayor and the Mayor, yep. And then, I mean, this is your prerogative, obviously, to choose who, but if it's, I mean, you know, I'm very conscious of the work of this committee, and I'm just saying that the level of participation, yes, so I hope you understand. I'm not being rude, but I'm very... And the other thing, might I add, also, I can understand that there is an external appointment as the chairperson, but I'm not sure why we need an external appointment as the deputy chair. So that's just my comments on the Audit and Risk Committee. It is a significant committee. I mean, I know that most councillors don't attend. In fact, they're not allowed to attend. So I'm just saying that. But I don't see why we should have an external appointment as chairperson and then an external deputy chairperson. I think that's a bit overkill. Thank you.
Can you speak? Point taken. Yes. Both points.
Okay. So in terms of the membership, so there's two parts there I'll cover up. In terms of the Te Tato nomination, that will come before Council next week when we're looking at the members. And so that will be in confidential, and therefore you and the Mayor will have the ability to discuss the mana of the person and that relationship and knowledge and experience to the Audit and Risk Committee. So, and secondly...
I thought we were doing that now. Beg your pardon.
No, sorry. That there will be a member.
Yeah. So I just wanted to cover that off so that you knew it doesn't get left hanging today and that it will come back to you for discussion next week.
If I speak to that too, it's a separate process for Te Tato. So we've moved at a pace and we'll get that named person by the 12th.
Yep. And then secondly, the best practice around an audit and risk committee is that you do have 2 external appointees to your audit and risk committee, and that when you are going out to look at the skills and expertise of your external appointees, that you're looking at what skills do you need. And I think from a point of view of an audit and risk committee, that is dealing with risk, it could be dealing with legal issues and dealing with counsel. It's not always, you can't always get all of those skills in the one person. And so best practice has been that if you are really serious about your audit and risk committee and what it is set up to do, that going out and getting 2 external people onto that is the way to go. I suppose secondary to that, you could have the conversation as, well, does that second external person need to be the deputy or just a external appointment? Yeah. And that would be your decision.
Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Your Worship. And if I could speak to the discussion raised by Councillor Rotorua Tate. I can see where she's coming from, but I think it's just simply having the external deputy is just a technical backstop, basically. So the strong recommendation from Local Government New Zealand and others is best practice is you have an external chair, an independent of the organisation external chair, and sometimes planes don't take off or land or people get sick, and so you've got that, I guess, deputy on standby should that occasion arise. I think that's all there is to it, really.
Yes, so we're following best practice from LGNZ. Actually, for councillors who are new, you may not be aware, but audit and risk for many councils was managed by the mayor and the chairs of committees, and it became a recommendation that if you're truly going to have scrutiny of the operations of the organisation, that it required an external chair. So they're trying to change that old methodology where we kept it 2 in-house actually, and also remembering that the recommendations from the committee do come back to council. Okay, any other discussion? Councillor Bentley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just with regard to the makeup of the Chief Executive's Performance Review Committee, it is my belief that as his position is the sole position that is employed by all of the councillors elected at large, the committee should be made up of all those elected members.
Point taken. If I speak to that, we've always had an independent facilitator of this review, and the recommendations have always come back to full council for participation in confidentiality, so free and frank discussion can be made by all councillors on any recommendations from that committee. So you will be involved. But the setting of the KPI is something that you usually give to a subcommittee, and then the recommendations come back. Okay. Well, I move now that a mover and a seconder that Council resolves to establish for the triennium of 219 to 222, pursuant to clauses 10, 11, 14 and clause 19, 30, 1 and 31 of Schedule 7 of the Local Government Act, the following council committee structure as discussed. All those in favour? Mover? You'll move. You're seconded, Councillor Wang. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? You wish your vote recorded against? So Councillor Bentley against. You didn't signal for or against, actually. Yeah. 2 against. Pardon? Certainly. So would you like a show of hands? All those in favour, please raise their hands. All those against? The motion is carried. Now we move on to the next item. Recommendation and adopt government delegations 219 to 222, page 27 in Stella. Do I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report, that the report adopt governance delegations be received? Move. Thank you, Councillor Rokawate. Seconded. Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Una.
So again, this paper follows the previous one. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail. It's just to say that in setting a committee structure, the delegations then come in behind that and set the purpose of each of those committees and what are the roles and responsibilities of each of the committees, and those come together in the delegations register. Yep. And happy to take any questions.
Open for questions. Yes, Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Your Worship. And it's just probably for clarification, at the bottom of the Strategy, Policy, Finance and Operations and Monitoring Committee, within the limits to delegations, so obviously recommendations from the committee will then go to Council, but it says, in the event that the Council resolves not to approve or adopt a committee recommendation, and this is the bit that I just feel a little bit confused about, the item shall be returned to the committee via the Chief Executive for review and subsequent referral to the Council for further consideration and determination. I just don't, maybe there's a better way to word it, or maybe you could just explain how that happens, because as it's worded, it appears that if Council then doesn't approve, it'll then go back to the committee, get discussed again and go back to Council, and actually if it's not approved at Council, I believe that that was sort of a closed case.
Could you speak to that, Una? I do recall one incident, and it was speeding limits at Hamarana. Wasn't approved, it went back, and then came back to committee with change that was then passed with a recommendation to Council.
So through you, Your Worship, that's actually a really good example of how that process would work. So that recommendation that came from SPNF that went through to Council, there were a part or sections of that recommendation that the Council didn't agree with. So by sending it back to SPNF with that intent of what needed to be reworked in that, provided that opportunity to do so, and then when it went back to Council, Council were happy to go out and proceed with the consultation around that. So that would be that kind of process. It gives the ability to go back to the committee and rework it or change it so that Council would then be happy with the way that it proceeds.
Further questions? Councillor McPherson.
Yes, I can see in the event of a referral back to the committee via the Chief Executive for review, there could be times and instances where the committee itself, that is the SPNF or O&M committee, could decide to let the matter lapse. But it does, as it's currently worded, require subsequent referral to the Council.
But the referral to Council may be to let the matter lapse. So it's noted at Council.
And that's intended by these words?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any more questions for clarification? No. All right. A mover and a seconder that Council resolves to adopt the governance delegations 219 to 22 and note the delegate responsibilities as stated. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Right. Part 2.
I'll move part 2.
Yep.
That was just put to the vote.
No. I just, again, no, I put, okay. You're moving, seconded, Councillor Rokawate.
Yep.
Thank you. Now we move to recommendation for council standing orders, page 49. Give you a chance to scroll through, find it. Do I have a mover and a seconder that council standing orders be received? Just to receive. To discussion.
So move.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Yates. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Una, would you like to overview this?
So through you, Madam Chair, the standing orders are effectively the proceedings for how meetings and committee meetings are undertaken. And they sort of guide the decision-making process and they guide the behaviours within those committees. There is a model set of standing orders which are in front of you today, and you will see that there are a number of track changes on those. Those track changes have been included to just try and make the explanation of some of those standing orders a little bit easier to understand. In adopting the standing orders, there is a recommendation around 3 options that need to be considered amongst yourselves today, and they are around the provision for meetings to be attended via audio-visual link, the option around the use of a casting vote, and also an option around the rules around a motion and the speaking to a motion. So the officers have put forward the recommendation as in front of you. So we are suggesting that the attendance of meetings via audio-visual link will not be permitted. The inclusion or the option of this in other councils is largely around some of those South Island councils that have some substantial geographical barriers to being able to attend a meeting. We don't believe that that is the case here in Rotorua, and the use of the audio-visual link, if it was to be used, doesn't allow for a member actually being included as part of the quorum or able to vote. So hence we're saying that we don't believe that needs to be a requirement for this council. Secondly, the use of a casting vote. So this can be used in the case where on a day you may have an absence and you actually have an even number of members, including the chair. And if you have a decision where you have a 50-50 effectively, the chair can use a casting vote to get a decision on whichever is on the table. And thirdly, we're suggesting that the option A, which is the formal proceedings in terms of putting forward speaking to and moving an option, is the one that we should be using in the majority of cases. If there is a topic that the council decides that they wish to deviate from that option or that formal approach, a decision can be made to rest those for that particular meeting. So you still have the ability, depending on what the conversation is, to deviate from that despite choosing that option here today. So I'm happy to take any questions.
So any questions which are really around these options that are put to us for clarification? Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Una, just with regard to the chairman doing the casting vote, whereas there's a tie, I was always taught that it's where a casting vote was in use, they had to go for the status quo.
No, and I think in the paper it does actually say that is a misconception. And yes, the chair can use a casting vote, but doesn't necessarily sway the status quo.
Yeah. We didn't use the casting vote at all in the last triennial. Yeah, we did the one before. Right. Any other questions? There appear to be none. So I'm going to put the motion as proposed, that the council adopts the standing orders as tabled, inclusive of the following optional provisions. Do I have a mover? Councillor Rotorua, seconder, Councillor Yates. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. We now move to the schedule of meetings, 1st of January to the 31st of December 2020, page 53. Do I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councillor Tapsell, Councillor Wang seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Una, would you like to overview?
Thank you.
We used to spend a lot of time on this.
Yeah, oh yes, we still do. So what you have in front of you today is the schedule of meetings for the 1st of January through to the 31st of December 2020. And so this sets out the council meetings and the substantive committee meetings for council. There is still some work required on this as we finalise meetings with our partners and MOU committees and things like this, but what this schedule does is set out nice and early to organise calendars for next year for when those substantive committee meetings, community board meetings and the likes take place. What will happen in addition to this is around the time of the development of annual plans and LTPs, we will add, in addition to these meetings, a set of forums, but they will be notified well in advance. We're still in the planning stages of when they will occur.
And Una, would you like to, just before we go to questions, also the relationship of governance with other entities like regional council, because those are meetings that are often put in, workshops, I think of the air quality and the geothermal working party, and we don't have much control over those.
So when we are putting this schedule together, the team do spend quite a bit of time with regional council and a few other entities trying to sort of work in how we can best make our committee schedule work and not have too many clashes with everything else that's going on in the Bay.
And could I also suggest, when we have this early, we always like it before Christmas, do look at times when you can schedule leave. And it's advised, if at all possible, unless it's for an overseas trip that you just can't change, if any of you are lucky enough to be going, that we look at more downtime on our schedule of meetings to try and fit those in. It's very difficult, and we have to understand it, but you must have a break next year. You do need to have these 2 weeks off during the year, just for your own well-being, let alone the communities. Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Wish. I'm glad you raised that one because I just perhaps through you ask Una, could you comment on the protocol for notifying governance or of taking annual leave, and also just another one is when this comes out, I can't see it on here, but when the Zone 2 meetings are scheduled for the year, if they can be included in the schedule so that we can factor that into our planning as well. I'm not sure if I can see them on there.
They may not have even set them yet.
No, they may not have yet, but hopefully by next year.
No, I'm getting a shake from the end of the room, so they haven't been set yet, and when they are, they will be included on the schedule.
And Zone 2 also, just to speak to that item, Una, we like to get a group of us to go to Zone 2, and we usually carpool to get there. So they're very interesting because that's where you hear back from LGNZ, Local Government New Zealand.
And just in regard of leave of absence, the official way to do that is to request leave straight through to the Mayor, and then the Mayor's office will notify governance so that we've got a capture of that in knowing the apologies for particular meetings and the likes.
Thank you. Thank you. Any for Councillor Bentley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a request for Una. Would it be possible to get this in a A2 for all of us?
A2 or A3? A2's, yeah, the A3.
Yeah, and laminated is quite good so we don't spill our coffee on it as we pour through it. Thanks, Una. Any other questions for clarification? Here not. I need a mover and a seconder for the motion that Council resolves to adopt the schedule of meetings for the period 1st of January to the 31st of January 2020 based on a monthly cycle, and that the following start times are agreed to. Operations and Monitoring Committee meetings shall commence at 9:30. Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meetings shall commence at 9:30. Council Committee meetings shall commence at 9:30. Move it. Thank you. Second, Councillor. No, we're right. Councillor Kaifong. All those in favour, please say aye. Well, that's a relief, because in the past we spent a lot of time debating whether we'd have evening meetings or not. And these are much more easy for the public to participate in.
Madam Chair, just wanted to speak to one thing. I don't think it's happened too often, but probably only a couple of times in the last 3 years that there has been a meeting where we've gone past the 3:30 time. And just wondering if we ever have a heavy schedule, is it easier to start earlier, or is that the time frame that it must operate in? Like if we start at the 8:30, we have a very heavy schedule.
Is there any flexibility when we know there's a particularly heavy agenda to schedule earlier? That's the question.
Yes, I know. We have to advertise meetings in advance, and the advertising of the meetings in advance doesn't coincide with knowing everything that's on the agenda. So it would be very difficult for us to actually bring a meeting time forward, because then we would be in conflict with the advertisement, and we have to put those into the paper. However, in saying that, there is also then rules about the length of a meeting, and there is the ability and the option for the council to look at adjourning a meeting or then taking a decision to carry on, and that would be up to yourselves on the day how you wanted to proceed with that. So,
Councillor Rotorua Way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. From experience, I know that most of our meetings, 3 hours, 9:30 to 12:30, possibly going to 1, and really that's sufficient for the work that we have on our agenda. If we would cut the waffle, we'd be fine.
Well, that's notice to us all.
Because I can assure you that I work hard to get mine finished by 12:30, maximum 1 o'clock, and I do know it's appreciated.
But I do think democracy is about where people have a chance to have their say. Councillor Bentley, you're laughing. We'll endeavour, but it must be relevant discussion, yeah, and to the point, I think you're saying. So we will endeavour. I don't think we're very effective at all going beyond 3 o'clock. Your mind starts to drift. So we try to keep it very tightly contained. Let's see how we go. Right. We now move to a resolution to go into public excluded. There are 2 items for consideration in public excluded. Plan change 3, appointment of hearing commissioners, and a notice of motion. The reasons are to protect a person's privacy and for commercial sensitivity. Do I have a mover for the motion that council goes into public excluded? Councillor Rotorua. Seconder? Councillor Kumar. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Carried. And that is the end of the public part of our meeting today. For those in the gallery, thank you for coming. It was very procedural, but it sets out the next 3 years' work. Thank you.